Hi again guys, and welcome to episode 6 of Weekend Warriors, the review series for GranTurismo's selection of sports coupes, sports cars, and also some vehicles which are more modern cases of muscle cars, but vehicles which are technically muscle cars, but also which kind of cross over into the sports category or sports coupe category. And in this particular pick we are featuring a sports coupe from Italy, and this is actually, to be honest, a car which I really like. I love the way it looks, and one of the main reasons why I love it in real life is because I love a good used car bargain, and you can buy these used, at least here in the UK, for just dirt cheap prices, ridiculously cheap in fact. And the car is the Alfa Romeo GT. Now the version that we have on the game is the most powerful, the sportiest model of the range, the larger engine, 3.2 litre naturally aspirated. Like many sports coupes of a more mass production scale, it is front wheel drive. To some degree that's kind of a shame, because being an Alfa Romeo, especially a sports coupe, having rear wheel drive, or at the very least all wheel drive like the Brera, would have been cool, because it would have allowed us to really throw it through corners like you'd expect a good-looking, stylish Italian two-door sports vehicle to be capable of. Being a front-wheel drive, though, you end up with a vehicle that handles and performs something more like a hot hatch, and although that's not bad, it's just not really what you'd ideally want from that kind of car. Not for me personally, anyway. Now, in terms of what you get from the vehicle, from that 3.2 litre naturally aspirated engine, you get 415 horsepower, which is not bad, especially for a naturally aspirated car, 341 foot-pounds of torque, and it weighs in, partially thanks to the front-wheel drive being lighter, 1103 kilos, which is not bad. It's not a stripped-out track car by any means, and it's not a particularly small car. It's a decent-sized, reasonably spacious vehicle. So 1103 kilos is not bad at all. As far as horsepower per tonne, well, it doesn't have the most power to work with, so 376 is not particularly surprising, but at the same time, not bad. As far as PP, I would say it's perhaps a little too high in its fully tuned form, as is the case with many vehicles on the game as far as I'm concerned. 523. 523 certainly isn't as much out of its range as some others are. It certainly doesn't suffer from the Red Bull Junior syndrome, but it's just a little too high. This car, I think, would be better at, say, 510. Now, that doesn't sound like a huge difference, but it really does make a difference, because that extra 10 or 13 pp makes a big difference in terms of what you can use and how much spec you can have in said opposition. And this car just isn't fast enough with that front-wheel drive chassis and the power that it has to work with at that level. Although I love the car, it still has to be said that the car, like some other vehicles, not just sports cars but hot hatches, sedans, etc., is one of those cars which, on GranTurismo at least, doesn't really have the tuning capabilities that it arguably deserves. It deserves more power, it deserves less weight. It doesn't have either of those things. It's good, but it's not great, and it has the potential to be. So the fact that it doesn't live up to that is a shame, because even within Alfa Romeo there are a couple of other vehicles which do live up to their potential and are actually better than you'd expect them to be. The Brera, for instance, which we will also be reviewing in this series, has significantly more power than this car. What's the difference? It can be turbocharged. It makes such a huge difference to a car's ability and potential just to allow it to have a turbo or a supercharger. Also, the fact that it's all-wheel drive makes it so much quicker off the line and just gives you so much of an advantage. And not necessarily just an advantage, it allows you to compete in some cases on equal footing. We don't necessarily want to have an advantage all the time, that would make the game too easy, but we at least want to have a car that can compete on the same level, whereas starting out with a front-wheel drive sports coupe can sometimes feel like a disadvantage. On the road, in real life, it doesn't, but on a racing game, it certainly can. Now, this car isn't bad by any means. As I said, I really like the car. It's a little expensive when you compare it to the kind of performance you can get from other cars in the game, but for an Italian sports vehicle, the price of 49 grand is a little high, but at the same time not surprising. Many of the European exotics and sports cars, sports coupes, various other sports vehicles are more expensive than American or Japanese cars. That's just the way it is, and that is partially due to the amount of kit and tech that you get put into those cars, and also to some degree in the case of Italian cars, the extra style. You are paying for that in one form or another, and that is reflected in the game. Now, this car, in terms of competition, does have a decent range. It doesn't have the best of performance, it doesn't even have the best of front-wheel drive handling, but it has a strong all-round package for its spec. So although, as I said, the spec is not as high as it deserves to be, what it does with the spec that it's forced to work with is not bad. It is a good car, I would say, overall. It's not going to win every race that you enter, but the handling is good. Although it's a decent size, it still feels compact. The car feels like it's very self-contained. It's not all over the road. It doesn't feel like it's spreading its weight badly. It controls itself. It feels taut and focused. Surprisingly so for a car which isn't really a track day car at all. And I would say overall it's a vehicle which, for what it's given to work with, does really well with that. And although I personally use it for fun rather than racing most of the time, it certainly is capable at multiple PP levels, especially say around 475-ish, to be a winner. It's an interesting alternative to more obvious choices. So if you fancy trying something new, I would actually recommend the Alfa GT. It's stylish, it's rarely used, it's pretty easy to drive and fun, and it has enough performance for the lower PP levels. So that's it overall for this particular pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.